Paranormal or not, what was the scariest thing to ever happen to you? I got stopped on dark road once by a stray pup. He came running towards my bike and I stopped to check on her. She was shaking, and before I could understand, two dudes came around with a stick in their hand and asked me to give them the pup. I didn't think well. I just put the pup in front of me and drove away really fast. Fostered the pup for a week, and my friend adopted it later. Informed police about the situation. It was scary-ish tea for me. In the old neighborhood where I grew up, there was an abandoned windmill that had once been used to pump water. One day I was playing with friends in the lot around the huge windmill, and all of a sudden the large wooden blade started rotating, something we had never seen happen before. For years it had stood motionless. Close bracket. If one of my friends hadn't yanked me away, a windmill blade would probably have whacked my body. Woke up in the middle of the night to horrific pain in my abdomen. Turns out I'd had an undiagnosed ulcer perforate in my intestines and it had flooded my abdominal cavity. I couldn't move and my 2-5-week-old daughter was in her cot next to me. That was the most terrifying thing ever. The pain was 10x worse than childbirth and I thought I was going to die next to her. It's nothing compared to some of these, but I got peer pressured into facing my biggest fear and it did not go well. On a trip to Mexico, my family pressured me into facing my terror of deep water by jumping into a cenote, very clear, deep pool in a cave. Being 16 and an idiot, I eventually did, and panicked so badly when I hit the water that I actually have no memory of getting out. The next thing I knew I was back on land, crying and gasping for air. I apparently climbed back out on my own at lightning speed, but it was so stressful that I actually blacked out. It's the only time in my life so far that primal instinct literally overtook me. Happened to my friend. He was playing soccer with his friends. The ball accidentally got kicked into an abandoned house near the playground. The whole neighborhood know that no one lives in that house and it's always dark in there. As soon as the ball got past the house wall, the ball immediately got thrown back out to them. Thank you Satan, I guess. Honestly, it was probably just a homeless person squatting in it. Back when I was a kid I used to sleep at my nan's house in the box room and I always woke up and couldn't move or speak. When I spoke to my dad and uncle about it they said they always had the same experience in that room. I have never suffered from sleep paralysis in my life. The first time young me realized we all die one day. Through a dream. Woke up at 2 AM. 7 years old. Screaming and crying until my father came upstairs to me and comforted me. That and some nightmares where I basically get these f-king hyperrealistic monster faces that pop up in a flash in front of me seems like, and it feels like as if I am on drugs because it feels as if it zooms in and out. Wobbles and all kinds of crazy shit. Still unsettling. Having a ruptured ovarian cyst and wasn't fully determined until about a week later. Blood from the ruptured cyst had started to flow towards my intestines and started to irritate it, so which was the reason why I had thrown up a massive amount of times prior and during that week before finally figuring it out. A few weeks ago I got up from finishing in the bathroom to find the toilet chock full of blood. Happened twice that day. Getting scoped in both ends in 2 weeks. I read that as scooped in both ends and I was very concerned. Good luck. I hope everything turns out well and nothing major or life-threatening is taking place. My friend and I were walking to his house after school. I was about 10 and he was about 7. We were walking to his house when a guy dressed in full black starts following us. We look back and he was pulling something shiny out of his black gym bag. We both started booking it to his house, taking a confusing path so that the guy couldn't know what house was my friend's. I was a kid and on vacation with my parents and my cousin. During one night I heard this weird sound and my brain made it seem like it was someone walking back and forth in the room around the bed. The stepping was too light to be human, so my mind thought it was logical that it was a paranormal creature that wanted to kill me and my cousin. Lots of heart pounding and sweating later I somehow went back to sleep and told my parents in the morning. Turns out it was just the radiator. I was driving to work at 3:30 am. Half asleep on an empty road. When a deer slammed into the side of my car. Like I didn't hit a deer. A deer rushed my car. I stopped in a parking lot to make sure my car was safe to drive. But then I had to drive back home with one headlight. That was also scary because I couldn't see if there were more deer on the side without a headlight. Just starting down a steep and long hill in winter conditions when the brake pedal goes all the way to the floor. Thank God just one of the two systems failed, front I think. I was able to pump the brakes and get it stopped and limp it to the garage. That sinking feeling when your brakes fail. I don't recommend it. No joke. My brakes failed almost a year ago. I was able to slam them hard enough to stop. And luckily no one was in front or behind me. And I was able to get to my job about half a minute away in park. But it was terrifying. Suddenly you're pushing your brakes and realizing that they aren't working and it's horrific. What I'm getting from this is that real life is way more scary than anything paranormal. My dog will go crazy at random spots in my room. And then she refuses to go where she was just barking at. Once I was sitting on my bed waiting to go to school when she went crazy and was facing my door. I didn't think anything of it. I was looking outside to see how the weather was so I would know if we could play football that day. My door was wide open. I guess I should mention that my parents were already at work and that my sisters were downstairs waiting for it to be time to go. Well, I am still looking outside. It was sunny and still. That's when my door slams. And let me remind you, I am still looking outside, no wind. I turned around when it slammed. I looked at it for a second and then turned back to the window to see there was still no wind. Creepy. I was taken to the emergency room for moments of aphasia, losing the ability to speak properly. Doctors thought it was a brain tumor or mini strokes. Had a MRI, ultrasound, and there was one more I can't remember. Turns out one of the medications I took caused blood clots. I think you lost the speak properly. Was staying in a hotel. Woke up at about 2 am screaming. With our fire alarm going off. People I was staying with calmed me down. We leave our room. Realize that rest of hotel is silent. As soon as we left the room. Alarm in our room stops. Report to reception. Who said they have no account of the alarm going off. We return to our room and have no issues, aside from a severe lack of sleep. Apparently the alarm had been going off for a solid 30 seconds before I remember waking up. And I had been running round the room screaming during that time. Have no recollection of that. No clue what it could have been. But something that truly haunts me thinking about it. Getting out from under the guy who was trying to have sex with me without my consent. Oh. I'm so sorry. Live. I'm glad you managed to get out, at least it's what I understood from your post, and that you're now safe. I'm sending you lots of love and my best thoughts and had a dream that Night Shyamalan directed more Avatar TLAB movies. The most terrifying thing on here by far. I let my mom count to 0. Having a nightmare during sleep paralysis. That happened to me frequently. Worst one was when I was convinced there was a couple breaking into my apartment. The guy had a gun and his girlfriend had a knife. I only saw their shadows and woke up. I didn't, because I heard them whisper arguing about how they are going to kill me. I tried so hard to move. I even thought I was about to let myself fall out of bed. I was still in the same position, so I could hide underneath. My eyes kept closing and I thought if I'd fall asleep they would get me, so I tried my hardest to stay awake. I finally was able to wiggle out of paralysis and had the fastest pulse I ever had. When I was around 7 or 8, I was riding my bike in my neighborhood. I did this almost every day. I had houses I'd stop at regularly and hang out with people. I now realize these hella nice adults put up with my dumbness every day and I love them for it. But one day while I was riding I saw a purple beat up van pull into our street. We lived at the entrance. I paid no mind but knew they didn't live here. They never passed me. They kept driving behind me. Following me. My street ended in a cul-de-sac and had a second cul-de-sac that branched off. I cut the main one real quick and turned down the second and stopped when I saw people outside, and I circled around and watched the van. They made a quick U-turn in the main cul-de-sac, just like I did, and waved at me as they drove back up the street. 1,000,000% sure I would've been kidnapped if those people weren't outside at the house I stopped at. Afterwards. The time me, my ex and her sister went ghost hunting at a cemetery in rural Oklahoma. A racist cop on a power trip showed up and pointed his gun right in my face. He also wouldn't let me drive the car because I wasn't Canadian or American. Even though I had my passport and DL with me. None of those Mexican, Swiss or Europeans are allowed to drive here. Also after the fact. That same crazy ex as above had a miscarriage when she swore she was on birth control but later admitted she didn't take them because she wanted a baby when we weren't both ready for it. I guess the saying red flags look just like flags through rose-colored glasses is true. Scariest in the moment. Definitely the shit I've seen during sleep paralysis. The worst was a huge muscle man without a head standing right next to my bed leaning over as I couldn't move or breathe for what felt like minutes. I am being dead serious and it haunts me to this day. I was exploring the woods in the back of my subdivision once. I always would find stuff like shots, alcohol, boots, pants and other crazy shit. I never thought of it before. But one day I found dead serious what seemed to be a human cranium. It looked like a rock at first, so I picked it up and it wasn't a f***ing rock. After that I've either been haunted or it was such a big thing that it literally triggered schizophrenia or some other mental illness. I just got off of my Zoprazone, heavy antipsychotic. When I was on it, I still seen things. But the antipsychotic didn't help. So I'm pretty sure it was a pissed off ghost or something. I brought back home evidence. But I never told anybody. I came back to explore it with my friend. We couldn't find it. When my husband was diagnosed with aplastic anemia just 14 months after we were married, he was really poorly. Tubes everywhere, I had to wear PPE just to be with him. Even the doctors didn't know how to treat him. That will always be the scariest thing to happen to me. The thought I may have lost my soulmate. One time when I was a kid I went to get a spoon or something out of the kitchen because my mom made soup for me and my siblings. Once I had gotten my spoon I turned around and a bowl fell onto the floor right in front of me and broke. There was glass all over the floor. My mom rushed in and saw me shaking with a spoon in my hand staring at the glass covered floor. Think I'd done something stupid. I wasn't hurt luckily, but that scared 5-year-old me to death. I still remember it. Weirdest thing was afterwards my mom couldn't figure out what had fallen. Everything was in the same place as before and nothing was missing from the shelf. The bowl must have fallen off of. In college, I randomly started having some neurological problems, shaking, cognition issues, tremors, etc. I'd just gotten out of the hospital for bilateral pneumonia and what we thought was mono. So I figured it was related. Then things started progressing and I was shaking almost constantly and forgetting words and having difficulties speaking. It culminated in what I think might have been absent seizures. I remember sitting on my bedroom floor unable to move and watching my hands do their constant little tremble. That's when I realized something was seriously wrong with me. I eventually got to a doctor and found out I had untreated late stage Lyme and the infection had progressed to my brain. A course of antibiotics later, I was healed. Save for some lasting brain damage. But the not knowing what was wrong. Just knowing something was wrong with my brain in the middle of a 10-class semester of college was absolutely terrifying. My best friend and his family used to have reoccurring nightmares about drowning in a sea of darkness whenever they slept in the basement. Apparently this happened with everyone in the family at some point. And they called priests over multiple times to purify the house, but it never worked. To be honest, I really don't believe in ghosts or anything paranormal. But even I got chills when both of his parents gave in-depth stories about the nightmares. When I was 10 I remember being really sick, like I just couldn't get up. So one night when I went to sleep I woke up to the sound of my dad waking up and I got up, but I was really slow and he was really fast. Like if you speed up a video, that's what it looked like. I was following him around but he kept zooming everywhere and I was going the slowest I can for some reason. He was just ignoring me, it's like I wasn't even there. Eventually I caught up to him in the kitchen and everything went back to normal. I told him about the experience and he said I might have been astral projecting. I should point out I've had experienced things like this before. Victim of half murder, car intentionally hit our bike. Though I don't feel scared thinking about that accident. But since then I'm scared of traffic and turnings whenever I'm on two-wheeler. Odd thing, the hit and run didn't happen on the turning and there was no traffic. But I'm scared of it sometimes. When the car hit our bike, I fall out from the bike and rolled over the road to some distance. English is not my first language. Driving in my first lake effect blizzard. I lived in West Michigan. And lake effect storms are intense. I had to drive 50 minutes to work in complete whiteout conditions. And passed by at least 5 jackknife semi-trucks and cars in the ditch. I was going the highway speed limit and still had cars passing me. I was on my phone late one night and from the corner of my eye I saw a bright light go past. It was moaning. Horny ghost. I've been a youth STEM instructor, fancy word for camp counselor, for several years and I'm now studying to become a teacher. I've taught a lot of kids in the past 4 years. This week I saw a picture of a man on news that I recognized as someone who had worked as a nanny for some of the kids I've taught in the past. He was arrested and charged with sexually assaulting children. The children that had been in my care. I've never been simultaneously so scared and horrified and disgusted and ashamed in one sitting. The idea of taking care of kids that were being abused and not noticing terrifies me. And it's made me reconsider my whole career out of fear of it happening again. Watching for the first time The Exorcist alone. At night. Of course. Lights out because I wasn't allowed to. At 9 over 30 years ago. Sleep paralysis. The first few times I was literally scared to death. Thought a demon possessed me or some shit. Then I learned more people have it and got kind of used to it. Pretty minor compared to these. But probably 4 years or so ago I was driving home from southern Maryland and got caught in a derecho. Scared the shitty out of me because there was no warning. I literally remember asking my GF yell when you see the tornado touch down. Many of the stoplights were out so crossing intersections was crazy. I recall it being just crazy windy like a tornado movie. I literally had no idea what to do. Stay with the car and pull over. Keep driving. Run. Etc. One of the few times I literally feared for my safety. There's a bit of woodland near where me and my late wife used to live. About 10 years ago. We went for a walk early on a Sunday morning and decided to walk through the woods. We came upon a clearing and, standing in the clearing, were roughly 20 black men all wearing hooded robes standing in a wide circle facing each other in complete silence. To say we were creeped out would have been an understatement. We watched in silence for a couple of minutes before one of them spotted us. Then they all turned and looked at us. That's all they did. They just looked at us. It felt like you could have heard a pin drop. We noped out of there as quickly as we could. I thought we had experienced some kind of supernatural event. However, I later found out that a local church group were running some kind of inspirational program for young black men and they would often go to the forest, pray and meditate on a Sunday morning. There was nothing supernatural about it whatsoever. I kind of feel let down that there was nothing spooky going on, though I have to admit it was kinda creepy at the time. My wife told me a story about when she was a teenager about 2000 to 2004, so nobody really had cell phones yet. At her friend's house. My wife. Her sister. Their best friend. Their best friend's baby sister, they were babysitting, and their dog. They watched a scary movie with a baby in it. They're all the same, take your pick. So apparently during the movie there was a doll on the floor, and whenever the baby would crawl the doll would follow. 3 teenage girls and a baby. Home alone. With a possessed doll. They lost their Plus. For about 3 minutes. They were running around the house trying to find the phone to call 911. And the baby kept following them, which calmed them down as much as you'd expect. Finally they convinced the dog to attack the doll, and they found out it was attached to the baby by a loose piece of thread from the baby's clothes. She says it was the dumbest she's ever felt in her life. None of the mother of my children folks. Had ghost experience. Still terrifies me to this day. Same. Was late teenage years. We lived in an old house. I was in the habit of staying up late and usually turned off all the lights before going upstairs. As like so many other nights, I switched off the lights downstairs and turned to the stairs. For what was probably only a few seconds, I saw a semi-transparent person standing right in front of me at the base of the stairs. I remember being curious, not afraid. I actually reached my hand out toward this apparition and it disappeared. That is when the fear came crashing into my mind. I don't think I slept that night. Even many years later as I type this, the hair on my neck is standing on end. We were playing hide and seek back then. Knowing my cousins were scared of the dark, I hid in the basement. I don't exactly know what happened, but everybody in the house started calling my name. I can even hear my mother crying while shouting out my name. I thought that this was a tactic my cousins initiated to make me shout and make me blow away my spot. Then one of my aunt entered the basement and searched everywhere with a flashlight while I was just sitting literally in front of her while she was shouting my name. Her worried face she was making while rummaging through the objects made me cry. When she went out of the basement I immediately followed her outside and declared that I was there. Everyone started crying, saying they searched for me for almost an hour while I was just hiding for what felt like about 5 minutes. To this day, I still don't know if my family was trolling me, but I was 5 that time and it scared the shit out of me. Not exactly scary and I'm not entirely sure if it's paranormal, but when I was 13 I was sleeping in my bed and my booty was hanging out of the duvet, and I know this because I woke up to something that smacked my ass. There was no noise but I felt it and it woke me up and I was paralyzed for 30 minutes when I realized no one was in my room. Recently, something similar happened, which was something holding the side of my face. It's genuinely freaking me out. When I was a waitress I left work around midnight after a late shift. It had been closed for a while. There was only me and 2 other employees there doing all the closing and cleaning stuff. We all walked out together and left. But when we pulled out of the parking lot I noticed there were 3 vehicles behind me instead of 2. There was no traffic and the extra vehicle, a big pickup missing one headlight that I hadn't noticed in the parking lot before, stayed right behind me. So close the headlight was blinding me in the mirror. I was speeding hoping to be pulled over, not using my blinkers, switching lanes and making quick turns, and I couldn't lose them. I had dropped my cell phone and was driving too fast to feel safe reaching down for it. I didn't want them to know where I live, so I didn't go home. I drove instead to this apartment building, planning on doing a loop around the building and losing them. But when I pulled around the back it was just a narrow alleyway with no room to turn around. They pulled in after me, blocking me in, and I just started screaming. One time, my friend and I were walking through some woods outside of my friend's house. The whole time walking through the woods, we could hear footsteps, twigs breaking and leaves crunching. We got to the end, and when we were outside of the woods we were talking to each other about the noises while standing outside the woods until he saw a man with a potato sack on his head just standing still. We don't know if he was looking at us, but he was just standing there and we got creeped out at the time, but we joke about it now. Dad was abusive. There was one day where he was madder than normal and drunker than normal. I was pretty sure he was going to kill me if he got his hands on me that night. Sheet of ice flew off the roof of a tractor trailer and landed on my windshield. It's pretty scary to be covered in glass and can't see ahead when traveling 70 miles per hour. When I was about 4 years old my dad backed over me with his pickup truck. I was sitting on my knees behind the truck playing with something and he couldn't see me sitting there. I was sitting right in the middle, and because of the way I was sitting, when the bumper hit the back of my head it pushed me forward flat onto my tummy and the truck went over top of me while I watched the wheel pass by just inches from my face. I let out a loud blood-curdling scream which luckily he heard and stopped. And I came flying out from under the pickup with nothing more than a headache and maybe a little PTSD. But that's nothing compared to my great aunt Rosie, who fell through the hole in the outhouse when she was a little girl. It was only scary as a close call. But one March when we were in our 20s, my friends and I were hiking around a local park with a waterfall. The stream above the falls was frozen. So two of my friends climbed. It was a jagged ice jam across, but the rest of us walked up to the old railroad bridge above it. We were all on the opposite bank 20 minutes later when the whole ice jam let go and everything went over the 50-foot falls. We just stared. When I was little, I had a massive fear of the dark. My apartment room at the time didn't really have any doors. So at night it's just a very dimly lit room surrounded by pitch black darkness that stretches to the living room and kitchen. On some of those sleepless nights, I'd look around the room and see, from the corner of my eye, a group of short gremlin-looking creatures staring at me with a wider smile. As soon as I look directly at them, they hide behind an object they're standing closest to, be it a wall, box, etc. Now that I think about it, how did I get over this? Sitting in a room on the American side of the border with Canada getting grilled by two cops about the identity and significance of one Tito Connor while I knew for a fact that my fellow passenger and co-conspirator was getting a full body cavity search in the next room over. Harrowing shit. I was at work and started having vision issues. It was like I was seeing the top left of my field of vision through crumpled up cellophane. It was so freaky. I, a 30-odd-year-old woman, called my mom. I was starting to panic thinking I might be having a stroke or something. She calmed me down and said if it's not gone in an hour to call the doctor. I was having no other symptoms so. I was so scared and my anxiety was through the roof. Well, it did go away within an hour. Only to be replaced by the worst migraine I've ever had in my life. I'd been getting them since grade school so. It was bad. That was my first foray into ocular migraines. Fun times.